Welcome to Meat Speak, powered by the certified Angus beef brand. And with me in the studio today is not Chef Tony Biggs. Instead, we've actually reached into the reserves. We made the call to the bullpen for the dulcet tones of the right-hander from Cincinnati, Ohio, Chef Michael Ollier. Chef, how you doing?
I'm fantastic. Hello, everyone.
You know, Chef, when we mapped out what we wanted to talk about specifically today, we just knew, we needed to make sure Michael Ollier is standing here with us from the inner sanctum of the world's headquarters of premium beef, because you sort of followed a path. I shouldn't even say you followed a path. You were doing something that a lot of chefs are now following along, and that is chefs from a classically trained, I guess more conventional background in the kitchen are finding themselves more and more enamored with the world of barbecue.
Yes.
Yeah, and can you talk about that? I mean, your background, you cut your teeth in one of the preeminent farm-to-table restaurants in Cleveland. You've obviously been at Certified Angus Beef for almost a decade. But at what point did that really trip your mind to say, you know what, this barbecue thing I should probably pay a little bit more attention to?
Well, I let's back it up even to childhood, and maybe a childhood that most Americans have had, where their experience of barbecue is probably a lot like mine was. So my grandpa was a butcher, so that means we had grill outs all the time, right? But barbecue doesn't mean throw things on the grill, and I know that now, but I didn't then. What I understood barbecue to mean was you put some whatever open pit barbecue sauce on a piece of meat, and oftentimes it was chicken, and you char the heck out of it, and that crispy carbony sugar, that was barbecue to me, just because I put barbecue sauce on it. I've come to learn that, in the chef world, I've come to learn what low and slow means, and then what cooking over direct fire means. But it really was a trip to Central Texas that was the epiphany. That's where I tasted true Central Texas barbecue. For those of you that know what I'm talking about, it's that salt, pepper, post oak on exceptional beef. That experience where that's the fall apart brisket that just simple, beautiful, and I don't know how else to describe it except for the epiphany and palate craziness that I experienced. But it was at that point, that was my turning point. It was like, where has this been all my life? Yeah. And as a chef then, how can this be? And I think that's where the culture is what really, the product is one, but the culture was what really has made it something sustainable.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned the culture in barbecue, because it very much is a case where everybody kind of knows everybody in the barbecue world, and it's funny because barbecue is defined by at least arbitrarily by its regionality. Texas barbecue tastes like this. Carolina barbecue tastes like this. Memphis barbecue tastes like this. But at the end of the day, it's not like the barbecue people themselves see them as like on different teams. Yeah.
Oh, completely agree. Not different teams at all. They may come from different backgrounds, as you mentioned, the different regionalities of barbecue, and they might hold themselves true to some traditions because of that. But the culture itself is what I think makes barbecue even more unique than its product. The culture of giving, the culture of welcoming, the culture of surrounding yourselves and feeding a lot of people and making a lot of people happy. Chefs know what that feels like. Chefs know how to feed a large amount of people and make them happy. And the best chefs are the ones that got into it because they like to please others. It's not something they got in because of self-interest, because it was more, I'm a giver, and this gives me that most pleasure from that, is feeding a lot of people and they're happy because of something I created.
Yeah.
Barbecue is so intrinsically that I think is the nugget, and that's why people are like, if they kneel at the altar of great smoke, and that's if that's sacrilege, I'm sorry, but that's the feeling that they get. It's such an epiphany.
Yeah, you talk about smoke, and that does seem to be one of those components that, despite the regionality of barbecue, smoke is fairly consistent, right? Whether you're in various parts of the country, but can you draw some of those lines about, what is it that constitutes barbecue in these different areas? We know lots of the people, we know lots of the personalities, and we're actually going to have a very distinct, well-known one coming up here in a little bit. But can you talk about kind of what are those dividing lines between Texas barbecue and Carolina barbecue and whatnot?
Okay, I think we can, generally speaking, and this will be from someone who's, I wouldn't say I'm the greatest historical expert on barbecue by no means, but let's start with Texas barbecue. Texas barbecue is pure in that it is generally salt, pepper, and post oak. When you talk to Texans, that's what they'll talk about, and that's Central Texas. And I'm sure that we can talk about regionalities all around Texas, but there's no sauce is the point. Sauce will be served on the side, if any. Utensils are not even welcome in some areas. It's just eating with your hands, and that's general in barbecue too. But so no sauce, it's pure in Texas. Carolina is really about whole hog cooking more than anything, and also Tennessee. Tennessee so much is so that we know some barbecue people that say if you want brisket, go to Texas, meaning they don't carry beef. It's all about hog, which is fine. Kansas City is about the sauce, right? And oftentimes a sweeter sauce. So those are generally the regionalities. And then there's morphing all in between. You can talk about Georgia and you can talk about Alabama and all in between, right? And so our guest is from Alabama, right?
Yeah,
the guy from Alabama.
That's right. If you do pay attention to barbecue circuits, or just happen to be somebody who watches a lot of Food Network, or honestly, he's been on like the Today Show quite often cooking. Pitmaster Chris Lilly.
Don't call him chefs.
I know
that. Don't call him chefs.
Chris Lilly from Big Bob Gibson's in Decatur, Alabama, is going to be coming up here. And Chef, you already touched on it, and Chris is, one of the folks who embodies this as much as any, and it is the idea of when you look at barbecue people, right? I mean, what they do is they make food that tastes delicious, but it's the people behind the scenes that really make that barbecue family what it is in terms of being so welcoming. What did you experience as somebody who came from that more fine dining, more traditional culinary background when you started this foray into barbecue and you began meeting the different personalities across? I mean, did they hold you at arm's length because you're not in the barbecue family?
That's a good question. Absolutely not. Anyone that's interested and you can see it in their eyes, like, what? How did you do this? What? Oh, it's so simple. I just salt and pepper and just 18 hours and this or whatever their descriptors were, and the inquisitive people that are interested in what they're talking about starts the dialogue, and then so this brand has afforded me opportunities to meet and interact with some of the icons in barbecue. The legend Mike Mills from Murfreesboro, Illinois, the Fox brothers in Atlanta, Wayne from Louis Miller Barbecue in Taylor, Texas. Heck, I've been in so many iconic places. Sam Jones, the whole hog king, that cooks barbecue, and interacting with these people. It is a small network and completely welcoming.
Yeah. So since you mentioned it, I have to ask, Sam Jones, in addition to being a whole hog master, doesn't mean karaoke.
He can karaoke.
Yeah.
Guy can sing.
How about that?
Yeah. Makes you like him even more, doesn't it?
It makes me want to. Yeah, I'm a beef guy, but I always make room for the hogs as well. In addition to the variances in the regions, the idea of the different sauce components. Obviously, in Texas, Barrett Black has always said the only reason that Black's Barbecue offers sauce on the side isn't because of the Texans. It's all the snowbirds who would come down in the wintertime, and his grandmother finally got tired of hearing complaints about not having sauce. That's when they offer sauce.
That's right.
Right, but when you look at, like, you'd mentioned, like, open pit, right, and barbecue sauces like that, can you talk about that? Like, Carolina's a very different style.
Well, whole hog cooking in Carolina is based on getting a good amount of vinegar to balance. And so a lot of it's vinegar base, and then there's mustard base also. So that's what's unique about it. And some of those translate super well to beef. Yeah. And what historically has been used on pork has been modified and been working great with beef. And we've even done recipe testing in our test kitchen to kind of mimic and some of those different regionalities and then try them on certain cuts and have great success with. And I guess my palate really goes I gravitate to the vinegar with a little heat. So I like the ones that have a lot of vinegar that would traditionally been used on hog. I'm using that on especially the fattier cuts like brisket, because you need a way to balance that fat. And so high acid content balances that. So look for something very vinegary to balance out a brisket.
Yeah. Well put, well put. One of the the best known barbecue style sauces that's out there is one that we're gonna talk to the master of here coming up next. One of the things Big Bob Gibson's Chris Lilly is known for was actually invented by Chris's wife's grandfather, who was the Big Bob Gibson, not to be confused with the Hall of Fame pitcher for the St. Louis Cardinals from the 1960s. He, in addition to making fantastic barbecue in Decatur, Alabama, was also the one credited with creating Alabama white sauce, white barbecue sauce. If you haven't experienced white barbecue sauce, you're going to hear all about how it's made. And now it's to the point, honestly, in popularity where it's pretty readily available. You can certainly find a recipe and make your own. Big Bob Gibson's did it based around chicken. They would actually dunk whole smoked chickens in Alabama white sauce and serve it that way. So we're going to hear a bit more from the great Chris Lilly as soon as we come back. And Chef, we're going to take a little break. We'll be right back. Chris Lilly, Big Bob Gibson's, Decatur, Alabama. If you run in barbecue circles, everybody knows Big Bob Gibson and what y'all do. But for those folks who maybe aren't living in the barbecue world, can you tell us a little bit about the restaurant, about the history, and all that comes with it?
Sure, absolutely. I guess the reason they do know about us, we've been around for so long. My wife's great-grandfather started Big Bob Gibson's. He was Big Bob Gibson. Started back in 1925 in Decatur, Alabama. And he had 5 kids. All 5 kids went into the barbecue business. So he started this barbecue thing. He was an L&N railroad worker, and then in his free time on the weekends, he'd cook for family and friends in his backyard. But people got to eat in his barbecue and thought, man, you're pretty good at this. And he hated the railroad, so he basically decided to open up as a restaurant with a friend, and they opened it up, and the rest is history. Big Bob Gibson, 5 kids, all went in the business and spread out, and really started barbecue in North Alabama. So we've been around almost 100 years, 5 generations. I've got 2 sons in the business now that are doing day-to-day operations at both the restaurants. So it's a huge history for barbecue in North Alabama.
That's fantastic. So the original location, is that still in operation? Is it one of the Decatur locations?
It is not the original brick and mortar.
Mm-hmm.
So Big Bob basically popped his restaurant up and down all over Decatur until he found a spot back in the 50s. Mm-hmm. So he built the spot, and it actually burned halfway up in the 80s, so we had to build another restaurant, but right across the parking lot. The building's still next door, though. After we refurbished it in the 80s, you can still see the old brick smokestacks coming out of the back of the coffee shop next door. So we've got 2 restaurants in Decatur total, but the oldest restaurant is now a coffee shop beside our largest location.
Is that like a rite of passage in barbecue where everybody has to endure one?
Yeah, you got to burn down at least one time to be considered a real barbecue restaurant.
So tell me about barbecue is such a regional thing. I mean, there's Texas barbecue, there's Carolina barbecue, there's I go to Tennessee, I see barbecue, and there's no brisket to be found, which breaks my heart a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But talk to me about a little bit about your barbecue, or North Alabama barbecue, or however you'd sort of niche yourself out.
Sure. So, really years ago, writers around the country, were thinking of a good way to, they basically created barbecue regions, and they say there's 4 regions of barbecue. You're Texas, and you're Kansas City, and you're Memphis, and the Carolinas. But it's just really, you can't really shoehorn all barbecue into those 4 regions. There's so much other great barbecue all across the country, and I say that Alabama has some of the best barbecue in the country. Especially North Alabama around Big Bob Gibson. So Alabama barbecue, think about it, it's located between the Carolinas and Memphis. So you get a lot of vinegar-based barbecue sauces in Alabama. You get a lot of the Memphis-style dry rubs. So you get dry rubs. You get the vinegar-based sop mops and things like that. But you also have the white barbecue sauce. That was original sauce that Big Bob Gibson started back when he started a restaurant in 1925, and he used it on chicken. He cooked whole chicken and whole pork shoulders. But the white barbecue sauce is a poultry sauce. But more than that, I think Alabama barbecue is the meat. It's the pork. It's the beef. It's the chicken. We've got a variety of meats in Alabama, but it's coming straight off the pit, and it's allowing the customer to decide what sauce to put on it. But I like to think in Alabama sauce, barbecue doesn't need a whole lot of sauce. Also, there's a specific style coming out of Tuscaloosa, Alabama, from Dreamland Barbecue. They've been around since the 50s. They cook their ribs directly over hot coals. So you almost get a quick charred rib that'll take, hour and 10 minutes to cook. It's almost a grilled rib, and that's a particular style that Alabama can hang their hat on. Years ago, the state of Alabama recognized 28 barbecue restaurants in Alabama that have been open for over 50 years. Also, Alabama has the highest number of barbecue restaurants per capita than any other state in the union.
Does Texas know this?
Well, I doubt they'll admit it, but so yes, with that, knowing that and know the traditions of barbecue comes Alabama. I say Alabama is the 5th region of barbecue. Yeah. How about that?
Amen. Amen. So when you talk about barbecue, it's almost been like this. Y'all have been doing barbecue. 100 years. There's so many barbecue restaurants that have been around for a long, long, long time, and you guys everybody kind of knows each other, but it's almost like the rest of the culinary world is finally starting to kind of notice. This has been going on forever, guys, and I guess when we look at sort of that sort of crossover effect that takes place, we see you cooking at South Beach Food and Wine. I think you were cooking in, was it Maui? You're doing stuff on the Today Show or Food Network or who knows. What does it mean to you to sort of be one of the folks, I guess, sort of carrying that barbecue flag into the mainstream?
It's really neat, and I've been in the business a long time. I've been full-time in barbecue since 1991 at Big Bob Gibson's. So yeah, I've been doing this a long time, and I've seen the changes. I've seen, this barbecue, excitement, this wave that sort of washed over the country and everything. And I think people, it goes back to the history of the country, and barbecue, didn't necessarily come from one person or one place. It's almost a melting pot from, cooking traditions from Africa, from spices coming up from Mexico, from the Spanish and the French explorers, bringing in our livestock and things like that. It's from the Native American Indians. It's a little bit from everybody that came together to create this whole sort of cooking style, this low and slow, sort of American barbecue style. So I think, barbecue is a true American food. And I think with the whole push of, people getting, the whole idea of, food being and cooking being artisanal and getting back to the land and things like that, barbecue is real. Yeah. And I think people all across the country, whether you're from the South and grew up on barbecue, or you're a chef in New York City or California or Miami, you can appreciate that. It's real food. It's real fire. It's the cooking techniques. It's sort of a rawness to it. Yeah. And what I absolutely love is when I go to the finest restaurants, white tablecloth restaurants in the country, and there's always some aspect of barbecuing or smoked meats on that. So years ago, I saw it when chefs would cold call me out of the blue and want to come down and spend a little time at Big Bob Gibson's talking about barbecue and learning about barbecue. Yeah. And to me, it's just the opposite. I want to go to their restaurant and learn, how their cooking techniques and things like that. So it's a good trade. It's a good trade. They're interested in barbecue, and I'm interested in what they do. it's a small. This culinary world is a small world. Barbecue, yeah, you know everybody. You know everybody that does it all across the country. But even beyond that, I think the realness of barbecue and the authenticity of barbecue has brought us closer to chefs from all over the world.
Awesome. One last question. You mentioned it was your wife's grandfather who was Big Bob Gibson. How did you
Great grandfather.
Great. Okay. Great. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you? I guess were you doing barbecue before you met your wife? Is this sort of joining the family? I mean, how did you come about to all this?
So yes, when I was a kid, without a doubt, some of my first memories are in my backyard with my father on his, charcoal grill, cooking barbecue, grilling away. So, yes, he loved barbecue. He used, as a matter of fact, he was a builder in Florence, Alabama, and he built some of the barbecue restaurants in Florence. So some of the older restaurants, barbecue restaurants, he built the pits, he built the buildings themselves. So there was a love for barbecue there. But as far as me with experience in barbecue, I married into it. Yeah. I met my wife in college, and after college, her father wanted me to come learn the business and do the Big Bob Gibson thing. It's worked out great. I didn't know how much I would have loved it at the time, or did love it at the time. But yeah, it felt right, and it feels right in the pit room. That's still my favorite place to be, in the pit room in the back of Big Bob Gibson BBQ. There's something about the serenity and the calmness of being back there, and just with peace and quiet, and all you can hear is the fat rendering and the coals popping, and it's really, really awesome place.
What do you guys cook over? Is there a specific type of wood that you use in Alabama? It is hickory, okay.
It is hickory. It's one of those choices, and I tell people, use what's available to you. Use what you can get. There's no sense in us, trying to import post oak or alder wood or we're going to use what's in our region, and then learn to cook barbecue with that wood, and to build your flavors around that specific flavor profile. So yes, we use hickory.
Awesome. One last question before we have to close here, because I have to ask it of everybody from Alabama. Roll Tide or War Eagle?
Well, I've spent so much money at the University of Alabama with all three of my kids going and graduating. I can't get out of here without saying Roll Tide.
Amen. Thank you, Chris Lilly. Thanks for taking time,
Thank you, Bryan.
Sir. Hey, take
My
care.
pleasure.
Back here in the studio for the Meat Speak podcast, powered by the certified Angus beef brand, is not Chef Tony Biggs, Michael Ollier, our resident barbecue aficionado, and Chef Chris Lilly. I don't know that they make human beings more salt of the earth, more solidly put together than that fine individual from Alabama.
So true.
You have known Chris for a while because you've kind of run the circuit, not necessarily going around cooking and competing, but you've experienced things like the Jack, you've experienced the American Royal, you've experienced Memphis in May, and Chris is one of those personalities who's always there. Can you talk about your interactions with Chris at a lot of these over the years?
Sure. Chris comes with a large entourage, like the Chris Lilly contingent is always around, the Big Bob Gibson crew, and just the kindest people you could ever meet. You can just hear it in his voice there. At the Jack, we'd be interacting on the Hill the night before with our judges, and the competitors meet before the actual event, and then Memphis in May most recently. And he's the most welcoming, right? Just consummate barbecue guy. Come into our space, enjoy. Let's chat. Let's have a drink, and then it's cool to see someone like that end up on stage too, because he's got a few. He's got a few trophies under his belt too from a lot of competition barbecue, but he's just salt of the earth, great guy.
Yeah, I've learned the last 2 years I've had the good fortune of attending the Jack right down in Lynchburg, Tennessee.
The World Championships.
That's right. And if you hang around the Big Bob Gibson cooking apparatus and tent, by the time their last dish goes in for judging and they can finally like kick back and relax, all those burnt ends that didn't make the final cut for judging.
Right. So there's like 6 perfect
That's
burnt
right.
ends. So they might cook, a couple hundred to get the perfect one out.
Well, all those, we'll call them rejects that
Yeah,
didn't make the
right.
final are just kind of hanging out there. So,
Looking for
some of
someone like you. I know
some
where
of
you're
the
going with this.
best burnt ends you'll ever have in your life were what didn't make the final cut at the Jack. So, Chef, that's about all the time that we've got. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join us here in studio. And you know what? Why don't you come back in 2 weeks, because we touched on it earlier. We talk about the various regions of barbecue and what constitutes barbecue and the people behind it. But Texas itself is probably one of those things, kind of requires its own segment, because there's so much that goes into Texas, and Texas people will certainly tell you that, right? Texas barbecue, don't mess with Texas.
Don't mess.
So we're going to dedicate an entire 30 minutes here in 2 weeks, all around Texas barbecue and the personalities and the regionalities even within Texas and the people that make that happen. We appreciate you taking time to join us on the Meat Speak podcast, powered by the Certified Angus Beef brand. If you happen to stumble onto us by some other chance, know that you can search for us. We are available across just about every major podcasting platform. I've been told you can also just search for Certified Angus Beef Podcast. Until next time, thank you, Chef.